So nice to see you, Molly. Thank you for having me, and nice to meet you, everyone.
Yes, let me give you a proper introduction. So, Victoria is the founder of the Institute of Belonging. Love that. A consultancy celebrating the systemic and generative power of networks, communities, and ecosystems. She researches, advises, and speaks on the relationship between community and belonging. She's particularly interested in the radical transformation of our connection to work. She's previously hosted an award-winning podcast on the topic, and if any of you are in London, she was the host for Creative Mornings, the London chapter for a long time, which is so awesome. And I just have to share how we met because I think it's such a fun story. Victoria and I met in 2015. In 2015, we were both producing early morning sober dance parties, which were called Daybreaker. Yes, yes, Eric, I love it. These were, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. parties in clubs where we were sober, drinking, green juice and iced coffee. And we got to meet in London. And so and we've kept a friendship over the years. So it's nice to meet in this way.
So nice. We've had many lives, Molly.
And we've both kind of focused in this, we focused our work both in this space of community. I think for me it was sort of accidental. Community was never the main focus, but everything that I've worked on has sort of led to this space of community in some way. And I've always looked to your work as a you've been kind of a leader in this space for me, and it's cool to have a conversation with you. So I'm hoping we can start with this Institute of Belonging, and tell us more about what that is.
Of course. So, as many great things, it's a lockdown project that evolved and stayed on. I've always been interested in communities and networks and ecosystems and how these different forms of coming together are shaped and reshaped in different sectors. But in the pandemic, there was something really powerful around it was no longer relevant to talk about community if you can't see people physically and be with them. And it really led me to this very big question around what are we missing the most is that really visceral experience of community. So why not dive deeper into that and understand how does community and connection feel, and look into a more, the phenomenology of it all, and like how do we connect to it. And there is this poem by Elizabeth Alexander that ends with poetry is the human voice, and are we not of interest to each other? And I kept going back to that, like,
Can you say that one more time?
Yes, the last line is poetry is the human voice, and are we not of interest to each other?
Mm-hmm.
And there was something really big for me. I was on my own in London during the pandemic, and I was like, my work is about community and belonging, and right now I feel extremely disconnected from it all. So understanding, what do we mean by these words? What weight do they carry? Like, why do we miss this so much? So it started as an exploration. And then I also wanted to highlight interesting things that are happening in my various networks and communities around this person is launching a book project and this person is doing distance walking in the park. It was a way to just show a lot of beautiful ways that people are finding connection and taking the lead on creating it. And little by little, this became kind of my main project, because I left my job at Facebook about 2 years ago, and this kept growing in terms of what else is happening, who's doing interesting things. Let's highlight, let's collaborate, let's invite people to really own the space and exchange what belonging means to them. So this is what it is now, a space exploring the themes of connection and belonging in a lot of different space. Yeah.
I think I would love to hear from you. How do you define belonging?
Oh, yes. For me, belonging is that you feel belonging in spaces where you can fully be yourself and connect with others in the same way. So there's something about there's no boundaries and barriers in how you are seen for who you authentically feel you are. So that is how I define and explore it. Obviously, if you go into the etymology of it, it's quite interesting. I think Susan Cain in her Bittersweet book talks about how there's something where you long for this connected version of yourself, and that it's something that you're always somehow searching and seeking. So it's only momentarily that you find it, which I found quite interesting. But yeah, I define it as being seen by others in the way that you would like to be seen.
Love that. And I mean, I can make up reasons as to why that might be important, but you as an expert in belonging, like why does that matter? Why is it so important? Why is it crucial for humans to experience a sense of belonging?
I mean, we are creatures that operate in groups, that make decisions in groups, that live in communities, and the complexity of life right now is really interesting. There is something about you are a really complicated fragment of identities and interests, and there's a lot of smaller pieces of ourselves that don't necessarily feel that they can exist in an everyday environment. So in your immediate community, say in your street and in your neighborhood, maybe there are pieces of you that needs to be connected in different ways with others, which is why having access to online communities and doing things with people that you've never met is so special and crucial, because then you can find the right pieces of the puzzle so that you really complete what you need as an individual. So that's been really incredible, obviously, over the last decade or so. But now you can really find anyone, anywhere who is interested in the very niche thing that you care about. And that's really beautiful. I find often in the most beautiful communities, people look around and they say, oh, wait, this is people like me. They have the same nerd interest. They care about this thing. They love cleaning the bathroom as much as I do. Hold on. And that's something that really connects us in our human experience. So very often we might think, oh, this is an experience that I am only having and no one else is sharing. But if you look around in the right spaces, you always find that it's not that not like extraordinary as in it's not special, but there are so many other people who share that. And the only way to find them, though, is by really being authentic in terms of what you're looking for. So that's quite interesting. If you're not being if you don't truly share what kind of need you have or what you're looking, then you're not going to find it. So that's also really beautiful.
Yeah, and to that point, I feel like it's a kind of a two-way street. Like there's the individual has to have a willingness to participate and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But the community gatherer,
Yeah.
community architect, the buzzy buzzword, it's their task to create an invitation, right? So there has to be equal, like it has to feel safe enough for the participant to share, but the invitation has to be set. And that's, as community gatherers, as you and I are, that's something that I think, and I'm sure that you do as well, a lot. I wanted to, you've talked about it, in your intro, how the connection at work is important. And this wasn't something that you and I talked about in advance. So I'm throwing you a little curveball here. But, at Caveday, we think a lot about what does it mean we think about how can you get your work done with focus, but also how do we create that space where you belong to people who also want to be serious about their challenging work. So when you think about connection at work, I'm wondering if you're thinking about like the workplace and how a workplace can help their employees feel engaged and a sense of belonging, or is it more from the lens of the individual, the employee, how can they feel a connection?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think, you know, when you look with the lens of the workplace, uh, there's something interesting around bring your whole self to work as long as they're really hardworking, that causes zero problems, that's really straightforward to work with, and, very happy at all times. And it's like, okay, so not the whole self, just the bits that are convenient. Okay, I see. So I feel, we've made a lot of progress from that perspective, but the workplace is still not a very safe place in many ways. I mean, we just, same people that were telling you to bring your whole self and that you were family are also like, and layoffs are coming. So goodbye, sorry, So that's been a really interesting thing to witness in the last, year. That's been quite big. But then from a personal perspective as well, we've had a lot of time in ways thanks to all the lockdowns and the pandemic to just rethink, what does work mean for us? How do we want to relate to it? What kind of relationship is that on an everyday basis? Is it something that feels quite friendly and balanced, or is it something where the feeling of relating to it is a lot more intense and you feel like you're trapped by it and you need to do something? There's a lot of strong, hard language sometimes around work. So I find it really exciting that we're in a place and time where we can reinvent what does work mean for us as an individual and what place it takes on an everyday basis, on a weekly basis, but also on a larger time scale. How do we want to look back having related to work in, I don't know, 20 years time? So that whole relationship is really being redefined and reclaimed in a lot of ways. And it's powerful. Yeah.
We are Caveday right now is leading something called the 7 core skills of knowledge work, and one of the core skills is relationships.
Yeah.
We think about the relationship to our work, relationship to self, and relationship to others. And in relationship to others, I mean, that is community and sense of belonging is such a big part of that, but also, like you said, like having hard conversations, learning how to communicate and like what you need, but also how you can show up for others in that space of work. Yeah. So you were not the last time I saw you in person, because we got to spend time together in London last summer, but the time before that, we were, right before the pandemic, early March 2020, you were still at Facebook.
Yeah.
And you were running. Tell us about what you were doing within community for this huge, gigantic conglomerate business.
So this is a really interesting time because Facebook had changed its mission statement to be all about community, but there was no actual team that delivers this mission statement on a day-to-day basis. And so we were a very small team of really grassroots organizers, people who have been in the space for a long time, people who like to build and get their hands dirty and really have built a lot of communities to come on board and form this very, very new community partnerships team. So it was all about supporting people who build community. So using mainly Facebook groups, but also in person and also through WhatsApp or different media. And it was around supporting these people and understanding what did they need to thrive. And the stories were incredible. It was, someone who started a running group for moms that turned into one of the UK's biggest kind of community ever. We had like farmers who 1 year lost all their crops and thought, this can't be happening only to me. There must be other people I can connect with. I'm going to create the space for them to come together and share and find each other. So for most of them, it was something where an individual had an experience and they thought, wow, this feels super lonely and isolating. It can't possibly be that I'm the only person who's facing this. And so we created an accelerator program for a lot of these community founders, kind of community leaders, to come together and meet each other and exchange tips and resources and ways of working and ways of tackling really big problems. And we had different leadership programs, different ways for them to come together in person and remotely. And yeah, it was the first time that the company was actually really interested in what are these individuals actually doing and caring about, and how can we support them. And my role was to lead the European programs, but also to think about, well, how does this connect on a macro scale to the larger community industry? Who are other people who could support these individuals? Are there grants available? Are there other funders who could look at this? Because a lot of these community leaders fell through the cracks of traditional funding because they're not a startup, but they're not a charity, and they had a very new kind of status that we had to work with. So it was super interesting. And towards the end, I was looking at what is more of a organic journey that people can have, where they get different support from different organizations and types of community as they progress along their journey as individuals leading sometimes 1 million people in a Facebook group. It was really extraordinary. Yeah,
I mean, it's one of the best things that I've seen come out of Facebook. It's a weird business that we all have a relationship to and thoughts about. But it was really cool to see that work. And that kind of leads me into my next big question on, you've worked with so many different types of communities really across the world. And what are some things that stand out to you that make like a community successful? And I know successful is a what does success mean? But you can define that in whatever way you wish.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think community with a big C, as we talk about, Molly, it's the community is the mission, and that's why people come together, not an afterthought. Very often it's we say, oh, and then there'll be a community around this, but it has to be thought through from the start, and thinking about what is the journey of individuals in it. How do they come in? What do they come in for? And maybe they leave at some point, and like, what is that journey? So I would say one of the most important things is to have a lot of freedom and not define exactly how people are going to be interacting in it, because there is the more room you have for people to shape their community in a way that works for them, the more alive and real and human it is. So sometimes there is a very almost prescriptive way to interact and spend time together, and I think there needs to be a little bit of space for the community to find their own ways and dynamics and ways of doing things. Accountability is a really big one. So making sure that if it's a community of practice, there is this real sense of you're doing this together, and it's something that is bigger than yourself. It's really important. And then, I mean, it needs to be human and alive and fun. I think there is for spaces to really have the transformational nature than they can. It needs to be designed in a very human way. So really thinking about this journey and human experience first.
Yeah, I love that. I think something that I think a lot about is there's like boundaries, and within those boundaries there's freedom, right? Like having a constraints. I think constraints for any activity are really important, because once you have the constraint, there's freedom within that. There's permission to push all the way up to that constraint. Like, for example, early on in Caveday, when we were leading in-person sessions, we would have a break where we would give people six pieces of Legos, just 6 Legos, and with 3 minutes or 90 seconds, in 90 seconds, make something with those 6 Legos. I think if you just give people ample time and a whole set of Legos, there's like, what do I do? What am I gonna, I don't know. I have no idea what to make. But if you say you've got only 90 seconds and 6 pieces, everybody, no matter how creative you think you are or are not, you can come up with something. And I think the same is in creating a community structure. Like there's a mission, right? And under that mission is when you can have freedom within that.
100%. I think structure is important in that way of people being reminded, what is this for? What exactly am I doing? Who am I connecting to? Okay, great. And then there's a lot of creativity that can come within that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. It's fun to think about. Just moving on to another sort of section, curious whose work you're thinking about or admiring a lot right now in the space of community.
In the space, I mean, so the more, I don't know what it is, but I feel like the more I get into this, the more macro I get. So I really like to have an overview of, what's happening and how are we integrating a lot of different topics or different sectors. And I really, not specifically community related, but I really love Jenny Odell's Saving Time book. And so there's something about, at the moment, taking a step back and looking at long time and looking at how we're part of something that is a lot slower and longer term than it feels. It's really beneficial for communities and for any other type of work. So I've been thinking a lot about time right now and how are we relating to it.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, Ella Saltmarsh, and a beautiful group of people, we worked on a podcast called The Long Time Academy, which was exactly about that with Headspace. So it was around beautiful meditations around time and feeling different time scales. And I guess it touches on community in the sense that what we do now has a lot more of a longer tail. So we've been looking at government structures and neighborhoods and cities, and how does the work that we're doing now have longevity that is beneficial for, not only the people that are following immediately after, but future generations. And so I mean, I'm also 8 months pregnant, so I do think about future generations a lot more than other times. But there is something about thinking a little bit more long term than the next event and the next gathering, or like, what is it for, and what is that bigger sense of mission? And so I'm really admiring right now people who are looking at a lot of these different structures and combining them together and asking bigger questions. I'm like, yes, I feel like we need that.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I really want to sit with. And in on the topic of community and belonging, like you're exactly right. As I think is like you and I have been in the event production world, and it's so easy to think about the next thing, the next, like, how do we get, forgive the phrase, but like butts in seats, how do we make sure that the ROI on that event is worth it? But that's not like, yes, that's important. But it's more like a Band-Aid, right? But like really thinking more holistically, and how, if we're speaking about community, but how can this community really dig deeper roots and continue to grow? But I think that that's something that I really want to sit with. So I love that. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if the pregnancy was helping inspire this.
I think there's just an overarching theme of, there is regeneration and sustainability in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different pockets of our experiences. But how does this apply to how we spend our energy, to how we connect to others, to how we build communities? I think there's something about, is this, providing value in the long term, or is this a quick fix, exactly as you're saying? And I think we're slowly moving away from that. I hope.
Well, at least you are, and I want to be as well. Quick fix versus longer term. Yeah, I love that. Okay, we're gonna switch focuses a little bit more, talking about focus and how you, as someone who's prolific and his your output has been remarkable since I've known you. But I'm wondering, like, what's your relationship to focus? How do you stay focused?
I work a lot in the body, so I meditate, I do daily yoga, I walk in nature. I need to be centered in my body before I can be centered anywhere else. So often, if I have a really busy day, that's when I'll take the most time out in the beginning, just to um literally recenter and feel like, okay, cool. I know what I'm doing. I know how it feels in my body. I know how much energy I have. Sometimes before I sit down to meditate in the morning, I have no idea. How am I feeling? What do I need today? What's going on? Because if I switch directly into work mode, I'm a bit frazzled and I have no idea how how do I make today work if I don't know where I'm starting. So yeah, I spend a lot of time just connecting to how things feel.
Do you tend to make, like, the end of the day? Will you make a sort of have a sense of what you're doing the next day, the day to come? It's okay to
Sometimes,
say.
sometimes, I'm the kind of person that has these very, very long to-do lists. And then I look at it and I'm like, wow, this is so overwhelming. I'm just going to pick two of these and do that. But um, if I start in a way that I can be just experience focus in myself, then I can pick a few things that I know are the most important ones, do those, and then see what happens. Um, I wouldn't say that I'm a very like, I love structure and spreadsheets in a way, but I'm also someone who works extremely intuitively in terms of this was right now, I'm going to do that, and then I go back to something else. I forever try to, prioritize the most important thing and the top three things. I've gone through so many iterations of organize your day and be productive, but it just doesn't work for me. I need to like feel that this is the right thing, and that's that's how I work.
That's, I
Not
mean,
I'm not recommending this.
but if each of us is so lucky to find what works for us individually, that's amazing. Like, that's,
Yeah.
if you find your way, that's, we're knock on wood, we all get to find that. I'm wondering if you, for those of us that are more that are a bit more like structured and live in the spreadsheet and live in the, don't live in the body as much, I think it's really important to like learn how. I'm wondering if you have a tip for how those of us who are a little more structured could lean into that the body and sense like how to start your day that way, or if you have any tips in that
I
space.
think it can be super simple, just sitting before you start your day, just sitting on your chair with your eyes closed, just do like 3 breaths, just feel how your body feels today, where you're at. Is there anything that you're sensing? Is there anything, is there somewhere where you're tense or somewhere where you need a bit more attention? And just, yeah, 3 breaths and you're already feeling like, okay, cool, I connected with myself today. Now I can go and connect with the world.
I mean, it is amazing how effective taking just a
Yeah.
moment like that can help set you up, right? Like, it's simple. We
Yeah.
all have access to that, and it really can make a difference. And all right, I'm going to ask you a couple of what are meant to be sort of rapid fire questions, but
Okay.
see how far we get. And then we'll open it up to questions from the group. So if you have been thinking of questions, please get ready. What's your biggest distraction?
My cat Stoughton.
Stilted. Who's influenced your work the most, and have you told them?
Probably Krista Tippett. Yes, I have.
Yes, you got to work with Krista here in Minneapolis
Yeah.
a while ago. So I love that.
Yeah.
What's a piece of content you've been recommending lately? Like a book, podcast, movie, work
Um,
related or not?
book Already Free by Bruce Tift.
All right, cool. All right, and do you eat breakfast? Did you have
Yeah.
breakfast today, and what did you have?
I have these new super high protein cereal that are just chocolate cereal that sound very healthy with some bananas and some yogurt.
Awesome. Forest or ocean?
Ocean.
Do paperback or hard copy, Kindle or audiobook?
Oh, depends on the content, but uh hardback and audiobook.
Excellent. And pencil or pen?
Pen. Black ink though, only black ink.
Yeah, I have a thing with pens. I only use the same, just the same one. I've just
Yeah.
got multiple. Jake, my partner, is very aware, and no one can touch my pens. All right, pals, if you have questions, let's throw them in the chat. Oh, I see that there's some notes on Daybreaker here. Yes, Lily. um, But in the meantime, if we don't have while questions come through, there was one that I'll sort of start with. Um, I just want to think like this we talked about community, capital C community, and
Yeah.
it's for years now, it's been such a buzzword, right? And like as someone who is in this space, I feel like I kind of have to avoid using the word community or community builder. And I wonder if you have any, like, are there any other words we can use? How do you feel about that? Do you think it's like,
Huh?
has it been diluted?
Yeah. It has been diluted because now it means literally, it can mean anything. It can mean a local community of volunteers coming together to clean the park. And it can mean, an app that, I don't know, is just, you're just purely with a very big group of people you'll never talk to. And it's like, it's a community. It's like, no, it's not.
Right.
People would never talk to each other. So how is it a community? So yes, it is a catch-all phrase now. I like to talk about connection of the people involved and ask questions around how are these people connecting? Why are they connecting? What is the purpose of them connecting? How do we know we're doing this well? And how do they feel they're connecting well? So there's just something about really breaking down of what did we initially mean by the desire to call this a community, which is totally fine, but looking at the different components of it and how they come together. There's still this question, often there is an audience and it's like, this is a community, and it's like, is it? What makes it a community? Again, where do people come together? How do they interact? How do they have the opportunity to have a meaningful exchange, like a meaningful conversation? So yeah, always pushing back and challenging when these questions come. Yeah.
I love that idea of is there connecting happening that can like create a community. There's some good questions that have come in. Jake asks, if you just moved to a new neighborhood like he has, how would you approach belonging? How would you find it, create it?
Oh, I love neighborhoods so much, Jake. I would approach it by being curious, like what's happening in this neighborhood, what's happening at the local cafe, who's there often, do people need help with anything? So for example, there might be a local WhatsApp group that you can join with your neighbors, or a way to volunteer in the neighborhood so you meet other people. I think it's all about being curious about what are the dynamics that already exist and how can you participate in them. And then once you understand that, seeing, oh, are there any gaps? Maybe there's an opportunity to create something. And that's the most beautiful thing. I feel like when you're new somewhere, you just have permission to be like, I just baked extra cake and I brought it to my neighbors, and we're in Britain, so that's extraordinary weird. People are like, wow, you what? But it's great. And little steps of connecting. Yeah.
It sounds like you have to be, again, you have to be willing, right? You have to be vulnerable. I don't think you need to be an extrovert, but it does take a willingness that could be confronting, right?
Yeah, I think though there's so much about stories in place-based communities. Everyone who's around you has a story of connection to the space. So, finding out, well, who are they? When did they move here? What do they like about this? Or, you might be seeing their dogs and kids often. And so people love sharing their story. And if you give them an opportunity to do that, then that's a moment for connection that's right there. Yeah.
Oh, well said. I love that. That's a soundbite. Okay, moving on to another, we've got two other questions here that I think we can have time for both. What are some suggestions you have for making people feel comfortable being active in an online community?
Sometimes we know that people have a certain expertise or have something to share, but maybe they're not doing it because they feel self-conscious or they have a bit of imposter syndrome. So if it's appropriate, creating space for them. And so, for example, if someone asks a question, you can say, actually, this person really knows about this. You should ask them, or could you share a little bit more? So obviously, you can see how comfortable it is to call them out, like putting them on the spot if they're okay with that. But often people are just like, oh, I know about this, but I'm just gonna stay out because I don't want to draw attention on me. But creating space for them to participate can be really a great way to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a skill, to it's a skill that can be learned, but how to feel, how to invite virtually.
Yeah. And I think virtually also, like there's something about what is the behavior you're observing. So if someone asks a question and it's crickets and there's never a response, that's very discouraging to ask a question again or someone else asking a question. But if you see that is getting a lot of support and good recommendations, or this results in other conversations afterwards, then you're a lot more likely to want to do that. So as people who manage and support communities, there's something really big about, well, what are you modeling for everyone else participating? Because that's what they'll observe, trust, and then enact.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And virtually we don't have that same body language response that we get in in-person community. Something that we talk about when we're training new cave guides is like learning how to be a radio DJ. Like you're not getting the same feedback that you normally get when you're an in-person facilitator. So you've got to like keep that energy going while also creating a space for other people to play along and join. So it is a learnable skill. But I love that question, Brandon. And all right, we've got time for one more question here from Lily. How might I be successful cultivating belonging in teams where it doesn't exist for me? And as someone who attempts to be vulnerable and authentic, but struggles with belonging generally. Ooh, that's a juicy one.
That is a big question. Thank you, Lily. I think it can exist in micro pockets. So if you don't you don't feel a sense of connection, belonging with a big capital letter, what are micro ways of doing that and having people share smaller bits of themselves that feel authentic? So that maybe it's not a very big truth about their, their identity or their experience, but it can be a smaller version of that. So again, with stories, going through having everyone in the team share a particular story of a particular moment can create a lot of social glue and a lot of connection without it necessarily going super deep. So it's always the levels of, how deep are people comfortable going and how deep do you actually need to take them, because maybe, it's a team that they'll spend X amount of time together, but they don't need to be besties. I would say, finding what are small, personal enough, vulnerable enough stories that people could share as part of an exercise or even over drinks, something that feels easy but real.
Totally. I think that's really great. I think there's like having levels of, so first of all, questions that everybody can have that everybody has an answer to, right? Like you don't have to think too hard. I asked you questions like, what did you have for breakfast? Do you eat breakfast? Everybody has an answer to that, but also, so making sure you have questions that everyone can answer, and low, medium, and high stakes vulnerabilities. So depending on, if it's the beginning of the gathering, starting with something that's really low stakes, and then but knowing that in advance, like, okay, here are my like icebreaker questions. Here's low, medium, high. And you're not going to start out with something high, because then it's just blocking energy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's something that is, it's like the 7 layers of vulnerability. It's like a little pyramid. And so you can see how if you talk about the weather, there is little connection that happens because there's very little sharing involved. But everyone's really comfortable talking about it. And then you can slowly go up this pyramid where at the top is sharing your fears, hopes, and dreams. So when you're sharing that, you feel like something's at stake because you might be judged for it, or you might, there's something that feels very true and personal there. And so judging in what environment you are and which level of this pyramid you want to engage in is very interesting as facilitators and community builders.
Love that. And it takes some forethought in planning, but there's, then it'll just set you up for hopefully more a bigger sense of belonging across the team. And all right, well, team, we've made it to the time where we're going to do some sprinting. Let's thank Victoria. Thank you for being here, and you're going to stay for a sprint. But Victoria, that was a really awesome chat. I could spend a lot of hours talking about capital C community and belonging.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
I know. I'm going to remove our spotlights here so we can come back together as a group. All right, so we're gonna get into our sprint, everybody. So what I'm suggesting here, hopefully you can all stay, is we're gonna update our names with our primary focus for the next 45-ish minutes. It'll be a little less than that. But if you are familiar with the Cave, what you're going to do is update your name. So we see your first name. Why don't you go ahead and add where you are? Most of you had done that already. And then add 1 or 2 words that describes the focus of your sprint. So we can sort of see what we're working on. We're not going to do a breakout room. We're just going to sort of dive right in to our sprint. And I'm hoping that you can turn notifications off, close any tabs you might not need. If you have your phone next to you and you don't need it, either chuck it across the room or more responsibly stand up and put it in another spot. So it's not distracting you. And we're going to stay focused. If you have questions at any point, you can chat me, but I will pull us out before the 30 minutes, before whatever, 30 after the hour. We're all in different time zones. And we'll have a quick share out on how that went. But for now, let's get a little energy going in our bodies. Rub your hands together with me. So we will sprint together, start together, sprint together, and end together. I'll pull you out right before the end. And in At the count of 3, we're going to give a big thunderclap and we'll start our sprint in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right, team. Welcome back from the sprint, everybody. We are just wrapping up this deep dive with Victoria. Go ahead and share any wins. If you had some great wins, small or big, would love to hear. How did it go in there? What are you feeling good about? And here's a link to that tune. I'll share that I was able to write up some takeaways from our conversation with Victoria and got to some other small tasks. So I feel like I crushed it in that time. Eric says, got date planned and meditated. All right, Victoria reached out to a coach I've been meaning to reach out to for months. Oh, yes. I mean, we used to be called procrastination nannies. It's not wrong. Lily says, got a bunch done on something I've been putting off. Amazing. Appreciating my return to that cave magic after a long break. Love having you back, Lily. Heather says, feeling slightly more ready for a hard meeting coming up. You got this. Hillary shares, feeling confident about my meeting prep and appreciating the session with Victoria. And Echo made coffee. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here and staying till the end. It's been a lovely 90 minutes, Victoria. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for sprinting alongside of us and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me. It was beautiful.
All right, team, as we do with every cave, we're going to high five the camera. You ready? In 3, 2, 1, right to the camera. Boom. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We will see you next time.